Nice.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So, first of all, please introduce yourself, sir.
Yeah.
Sergeant.
Senior Sergeant.
Pardon me, Senior Sergeant.
Exactly. So my name is Rasmus Almqvist. I did my military service back in 92 and 93, which is another time and feels like 100 years ago. And so nowadays I have a military. I'm a senior sergeant. I have certain responsibilities in times of crisis, which I'm not going to delve into too much. But then on the side, I do spend a lot of time training my skills, my military skills as a reservist. I do it voluntary, but I also do it through different types of mandatory training that I'm ordered to do as part of my reservist status.
Okay. The second question that I wanna ask is, when was the last time you participated in one of those types of training, and what kind of training was that?
Yeah. So the last time I actually took part in a military training was back in February. It was a company-sized training where we had people from different types, from different kinds of units. So you have mortar units, you have reconnaissance units, you have just regular Joes, you have officers, and then you have support, maintenance, logistics, which is the area which I'm specialized in. That was in February. And the next time I'm going to do a similar thing is in fact this weekend, when we are going to be out in the woods again. Again, this time more on the supply, maintenance, and support functions, learning and training on how to support a company-sized unit in battle.
Okay. So it's not like how long does it usually take one of those types of training? Is it a week? Is it 2 weeks? Is it 2 days? How does it work in Finland?
Yeah, so there's three types of ways in which you can train yourself as a reservist. At the very sort of basic level, we have voluntary courses, which are weekend-long things. So you go there late in the afternoon on a Friday, you train on a specific thing, specific skills that you want to become better at, and that then ends on a Sunday. So that's the sort of a weekend course. The size of the course tend to vary, but it's always specifically focusing on one specific skill, right? Then we have voluntary training, which can be where actually you train with your reservist unit. So that's a unit training. It's still voluntary, but the military will actually call you up and say, hey, we have a voluntary training coming up. Do you want to join? You can join if you want to. And I would say 99% of people who receive these sort of invitations do join. They can be anything from a week to a couple of days or even 2 weeks. It really depends on what it is they want to be training you on. And then you have these actual refresher training where you have bigger units or specific tasks that they absolutely want you to know in your weapon systems, for example, or they want to train officers in leading, for example, a battalion size unit. You need to have people there to actually perform duties so you can train every single individual in that unit to work as a cohesive unit. And that can be anything, again, from a week to 2 weeks. That's normally the way it works. So 3 levels, different time scales, and different focus on the training that we receive.
Okay. So in your case, how does the 80 days a year sum up?
Yeah. So for me, the latest year has been, I would say, probably the vast majority of those days have been completely voluntary. That's the basic level when you train on specific skills with people who train on that specific skills with you. And then I had a week where I was trained on a specific skill that the military wanted me to be aware of. And then I was also called up for a voluntary training by the military for a week.
Okay. Before we dive into some philosophical questions, so you have a civilian profession as well. You do
Yep.
you do stuff in real life apart from going outside in the woods and shooting a lot of guns. So what is that you do?
Sure. So I'm a VP global sales at a software company, a Finnish software company that is producing patient engagement and entertainment solutions plus hotel TV solutions. Nothing to do with the military. It's a normal civilian sales job where I lead a sales team, also lead marketing. And so it's a really interesting job. And as a good sort of counterbalance to all of that, I do my military training. But the military thing is is for example, it's not frowned upon at all. I mean, we are a society which has long and deep traditions of people doing their bit in supporting society, and the military training just one part of that. But yeah, I have a normal day job, and of course, when the kids were a little bit smaller, I couldn't participate during weekends. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't still be married. But now, with the kids are a little bit older, I think also my wife thinks it's a pretty good idea for me to get out with the boys in the woods.
Vent a little bit over the weekend, or maybe a little bit longer sometimes. So I know that there's in Finnish there's this term Sisu, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'll try to explain it how as far as I do understand it, because for a Latvian we don't have that kind of term, but just for a comparison, we have our own superhero. Finns probably also have a superhero, some sort of, and the superhero we have is a bear slayer. But the problem, the problem is that that's an external guy. That's a person, and that's an external person. This is not something within me. This is someone from outside, which kind of implies that there's a savior, some sort of savior coming to help you. But as far as I understand the term Sisu, it's about internal grit and overcoming some horrible situations. I mean, just last week, during the training last week, it wasn't physically that hard. Like, let's be honest, it wasn't that hard. The toughest part was that my feet were wet on Monday and they stayed wet until Thursday, and that was horrible. And there was nothing I can do about it. And they were freezing, and then they were hot, and then they were like just boiling in the boots and all of that stuff. Can you explain me to as a foreigner? What does Sisu mean for a Finnish person?
I would say you were almost there. So for a Finnish person, Sisu is grit and determination and the will of not giving up in the face of adverse situations or overwhelming opposition. And yes, that is part of the thing, but it's also, I would argue, that there's an element of sort of forefathers and those who came before you who are now looking upon you saying, hey, we didn't give up, neither should you. So there's also, it comes with a level of responsibility towards past generations and the Sisu they showed in adverse situations.
Okay. So there's a long-standing tradition of that. So how old is the term? It's probably like,
I would say if you asked me how long the term has been around, I wouldn't be able to tell you. It's generational. So it probably goes back as far as there are written records, or at least the concept of this. It may have changed slightly, but it's the concept goes back to time immemorial, really.
Yeah.
It's been there, and it's something that has been a defining factor of who we are. We've always been a borderland between Sweden and Russia. And I mean, the Finnish climate is not the easiest. It's not that it's cold all the time, or it's not that it's hot all the time, because I mean, it can be cold, but it's kind of what you probably are familiar with, this sort of wet, gray, really horrible weather that you have to endure, and combined with external difficulties. That's when you really have to dig deep and ask yourself if how to go through this, and you come to the realization very quickly that the only way to get through a difficult situation is to look for power from within yourself. That is Sisu. So the term has been around forever, and the idea of Sisu has been around forever.
Okay, we will definitely need to come up with a modern version for Latvians of some sort.
100%.
Yeah, but also just trying to twist the same question in a bit different direction, because from my own experience, I know that, like, if I am going on a training over a weekend, and I know that I have to go to work next Monday. I mean, I could push myself really, really, really hard, but there's a risk that I'm gonna break something. And where's the balance? How do you find the balance? Because I mean, sometimes you just, and it's not about sitting down and whining that it's really hard thing to do. It's just that I don't want to break a leg and end up in the hospital, because I know that next week I have to work and there's plenty of stuff I have to do. So there has to be some sort of balance there. How do you find that?
Well, I think the first thing you need to understand is when you have had your military training as a conscript and the basic training and everything that goes with it, it's about a year. So you kind of already exposed to all of these elements that have to do with being hungry, being wet, being tired, being absolutely exhausted, not having slept for 3 days. So you kind of have it in your backbone somewhere. You can pull up that feeling of adversity. And so now when I'm obviously in my head, I'm still 19 or 20, but now I know exactly how far I can push myself. So you have to pace yourself. You realize that you cannot push yourselves to the extremes on day one. If you are out in the woods for a week, for example, you have to pace yourself, and you have to realize that the most important thing, and you're going to come back as a better trained, better informed, better soldier, and those are the skills you're there to learn. So I would say that the answer to your question about where to find the balance is to first having exposed yourself to how far you can go, and then be sure to pace yourself to stay within the limits of what is possible.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I know that was it a week or 2 weeks ago, there was a how would it translate to English, a battle resilience course
Yeah.
for the military academy here in Latvia, and those conscripts, actually, they're not conscripts, they're what's the term? How do you call a professional soldier who is about to become an officer? What's the term?
A cadet?
A cadet, exactly, yeah. So they were enduring something like 50 kilometers of marching a day, and doing that over a week or something. It was horrible, and they were broken down after that. But yeah, that's exactly the point. They're 20-ish, and that's a bit different. But yeah,
But it goes back to a lot of the philosophy of any military thinking is you can only operate within the bounds of your own capability. You should not overstretch yourself, because if you go too quick, you're unable to support your troops. The logistics won't follow, for example. And so that's the mentality of yes, showing everything you got, but don't push yourself beyond what you actually can cope with. You're just going to break yourself. And as we know, any military situation is not going to last a week. You may be out there for weeks or months in the field. You need to be able to support yourself, and that is the sort of learning that I've taken from it so far, is that you cannot push yourself to doing something that is impossible. It may sound heroic, but the graveyards are filled with heroes, and if you want to live to fight another day, you need to pace yourself.
yeah, there was a great saying about the fact that the border between heroism and stupidity is sometimes so vague that you can't really tell the difference.
Mm-hmm.
But also pulling the same idea into a little bit different direction. I know that there's a huge support for overall total defense concept in Finland.
Yeah.
So how does it work? Like, how is the Finnish Defense Force structured? Like, for a layperson from outside, just explain me on 10 fingers.
Sure. I'd like to start with the fact that everybody receives absolutely the same basic training. Whether you're going to be an officer, a general, or the president of Finland, you have received the same basic training. So you know the structure itself. Everybody who then receives special training in a specific military capacity, great. It's fantastic that you have these specialist people who have special roles within the military, and then you have refresher training. But that is just the military. We have a system of conscripts. We have a reservist army. Something over 900,000 people are reservists in the army, and we have an active reserve of about 260,000 people. But that is a reserve army, which means that we all have different types of jobs and roles in civil society. Some of those we can take into our military roles. For example, if you are a plumber, if you are an electrician, it kind of lends itself quite well for that person to be in, for example, maintenance and logistics. Or if you're a truck driver, well, wouldn't it be great if you're a truck driver and you know how to fix trucks, that person is then a truck driver in the military. All right, take it to the next level then. Every single company that has any role in supporting critical infrastructure, they will have their own military assignments in case of crisis. So, if, for example, if you are, in the logistics sector in civil society, do you have a specific role to play in, for example, arranging logistics, or if you are running a warehouse, or if you're a telecom operator, then you have specific things that you as a leader in that particular company need to do. And those people are trained just as a person in the military is trained on military duties. These guys are trained on things that they would need to do in times of crisis. So we have a total defense thinking here in Finland.
Can we elaborate on that one a little bit more before we move forward?
Sure.
So is that something that is done on voluntary basis, or is it some sort of there's probably a legal framework for that? I know that right now in Latvia, there's just like during the months of May or April, I might be wrong, but there's a law that has been finally that went through the parliament, and we finally have this institute of support for the National Guard. So companies and private individuals can apply to support the National Guard without actually taking guns into their hands.
Yeah.
Some of them can't. Some of them are like too old for that. Some of them are not physically capable of doing that. But there's still plenty of roles that they can fill in. So what is the model in Finland?
It's a combination of both voluntary and mandatory. So there are laws surrounding crisis situations. We have a preparedness law here in Finland, which then assigns specific companies to, for example, perform certain duties in times of crisis. Another example I can give you, if you are a manufacturer of concrete elements, right? During your normal, day-to-day job, you create concrete elements for housing, for example.
Yeah.
During times of crisis, there are already plans in place on how to convert that factory into producing bunkers, for example. That is just one example. And so if you are one of those people who do this, they will place you in a role. They will have a plan for you on what to do in times of crisis, and you will receive your orders. And these are things that are well planned, and people know pretty much what they need to do. Obviously, situations change, but these would be an example of things. Yet voluntary, yes. Some of those are volunteers and they take up military training, and some do civilian crisis management training outside of the military, for example, with the rescue services. So yes, it's a combination of both voluntary and mandatory.
Okay.
And the acceptance within society is super, super deep.
Yeah. From what I gather, there's like at least 80% support, for the whole thing. But what I heard is that you have a law for what was the title? Preparedness law for prepared. And how long has it been in place? Because I can imagine that it didn't happen yesterday. So you've been doing that for quite some time.
We've been doing it for quite some time. I mean, the law itself changes with situations changing, so there are constant updates to those laws. But it's been going on since the Second World War. Those laws have been in place, which regulates who is allowed to do what during a times of crisis, and who are actually enforced or forced to do certain things. This, for example, also includes the movement of civilian population within the borders of Finland.
Okay. This is really interesting, and I think there's probably a lot we could learn from Finland in that regard. So if we move higher up the chain, what's next on the table after the supporters and all of that stuff?
Well, I would say if you look at all of this and you say, like, where do you want to go next in terms of explaining our system, the way we fight, is really around the fact that we want to choose where we fight and how we fight a war. And that's why we've designed a tactic, a military strategy, which is around a warfare of movement, where we do not want to build strict front lines that we will hold. It's going to be flexible. It's going to be very moldable. And the whole idea is to exhaust any enemy or any adversary that comes into Finland, regardless of who that is, to exhaust their resources so that we can take up the initiative. And that's when, for example, if you drive around Finland and you look at bridges that you are driving of the on the motorway, you will see there are little hooks on each bridge, on the pillars, and those are there so that they can be blown up. Sometimes you will come to a motorway which is slightly just increasing in width. Those are landing places for our jets and foreign jets that want to land as well. So we are, the whole country has been built up around this idea of it can be utilized at our choice at a time that we choose to have a fight. There are so many ways in which the preparedness is utilized, and because it's structural and it's been going on for years, it is, I would say, a society that has built itself up to really stand up against an overwhelming enemy. Another example is, you've probably seen news about the shelters, both under Helsinki and other cities.
Yeah.
Those are massive. And again, this is used for both civilian purposes and military purposes. So many of these shelters are used for public swimming pools, for example, or sports centers, or parking places beneath Helsinki or other major cities. And in times of crisis, they will be shut. People have to move out their cars. The gym is going to be closed, and that's where
unfortunately.
That's where they can be used. And obviously the benefit here is multifold. You don't have to build separate infrastructure for military and civilian purposes. But the other benefit is that people will know where their shelters are if they need to go there.
Yeah.
So they're quite impressive. And so when you drive underneath Helsinki for minutes and minutes and minutes, and you're like, whoa, this is so big. And you have these blast doors that you go through. You tend to realize how much money is being poured down into infrastructure that has dual purpose.
Yeah. So, but if we move up the chain of military structure, so you have a huge reserve, and it's not like all of the reserve is the same. There are different kinds of tiers of reserve, and then there's the professional military, and somehow you are also now tied into the whole command chain of NATO. How does that whole part work?
Yeah, so we have a small force of professional soldiers who, for the most parts, or most people there are in the capacity of trainers. So they will train reservists. They will be there as company commanders, lieutenants, and whatnot, and they will supervise the training, and they will also participate in the training. That is a very small portion of the overall force. Then we have our active reserve, about 260,000 individuals, maybe fluctuating a little bit up, a little bit down, depending on how many people are available. And then we have the deep reserves, which is more than 900,000 people who have all been trained in similar ways. We know our weapon systems. We know how to use them. So we can be moved around depending on the need. And in a situation of crisis, the actual active reserve will be called up, whereas the deeper reserves will function in just normal civil society, not knowing whether they're going to be called up or not. But if they are called up, they will do their duty. And that's how we work. And yes, we have joined NATO a few years ago. And for a long time, I would say we built up a military that was independent of any external force. We built this system since the Second World War, sometimes with a lot of success, sometimes without a lot of success. And there has been budget cuts, of course, from time to time, but we maintained the system. Whereas most of Europe, I would say from the sort of mid-90s, decided to forego conscription. We maintained it because, number one, it was popular. People liked it. It was a tradition. You did serve your country for a year, for example. Refresher trainings have been always really popular. So people go about waiting to be called up. And so when we joined NATO, it felt like a natural step. And I know there are a lot of NATO members who actually look up to Finland and also partly Sweden as an example of how to sort of maintain your military capability despite there being no military threat. It takes a long time to build up capability, military capability. It doesn't take too many years to just wither it down and destroy it. But we never did it. You may argue that that's because people were not really interested in change. They were accustomed to it. That may be, but it has served us well.
Yeah, I mean, so far, I think this has proven to be the right strategy because for anyone living next door to a neighbor like Russia, I don't think there's another option, and I don't think there's any doubt that is the right way to go, because like Ukraine has a really long front line, but Finland's border is even longer with Russia, even longer, and it's probably terrain wise, it's even more complicated, and
It is, and so when you actually look at the border between Finland and Russia, you won't see any major roads going east to west. For example, I'm just going to lay out the geography here. The other one is you will see a lot of lakes that need to be actually they're acting as a blocker. And then the third element is you will see a lot of forests. So trying to penetrate Finland from the east is not going to be easy. And that's why we've, as a military strategy, our decision makers, our political leaders, and in particular our military leaders, have decided to have a more flexible defense. It's perhaps better to let the enemy exhaust its resources in the deep forests of Finland than try to stop them at the border. You will also see that the population density is super low in the east. So there's room to trade time and resource for geography, for example.
Has it been like that for has it been like that always, or is it something that happened since the end of the Second World War?
Well, no, it's always been like that, in fact.
Okay.
So if you go back already back to, I would say, the 1700s, Finland, well, if we go back, like way back, Finland has, or I would say Russia and Sweden, including Finland, have seen somewhere between 15 and 20 different wars in the last 800-900 years. And many of those wars have been exactly the ones that I'm describing, which is you get a military force into the country and then little by little they're just being eaten up. Obviously, the great example of that would be the Winter War and the so-called Motti fighting that took place in many parts of Finland. What that essentially is a Soviet force making its way into Finland over the Finnish border and then being stopped at some point 30, 40, 50 kilometers into Finland and then chewed up bit by bit. And it's called a Motti. A Motti is essentially a measure of wood that you pack. And that's how they describe it. They pack them up in little bits and then just destroy them one by one. The point, of course, is to cause as little casualty to yourself or expose yourself as little as possible and cause maximum damage and casualty to the enemy. And that's the whole idea. And that's why the tactic has now changed, again, back to I would say, the previous doctrine where you are allowing the enemy to get into your territory and then just deplete them of resource.
Okay, let's unpack the hot potato that is rolling around the table. Over the course of last few weeks, there has been a drone incident every 2 days in Latvia. Something flew into the airspace. In some cases, it flew back. In some cases, it fell in a lake. In other case, it blew up, hitting an empty gas container near a town called Rezekne, and like there's been very dual reaction from general society because people are afraid. Naturally, they're afraid. We don't have that sense of resilience that Finns have. We haven't been preparing for that for the last 60, 70 years. And what would be your comment on that? How would Finns react to that kind of situation?
I would say with calm and resilience and just a calm posture. when I speak to my friends and colleagues about this, it's I think most people tend to look at this as an unfortunate thing that happens, but something that you should prepare to chew up and to accept. It's almost like a price you have to pay for allowing or for supporting Ukraine. They have a right to retaliate. They have a right to defend themselves. So without getting involved yourself, I think it's a price that is well worth paying to have some Ukrainian drones drift into Finland. The second thing I want to talk about is that has unfortunately also had a spillover effect on our political leaders, in the sense that I think they thought, well, everything is fine. We have a resilient people. We are calm and collected. We don't panic over small things. So they kind of didn't put up all the surveillance systems, and in particular the notification and alarm systems to the public in general. So we had a debate about this not being in place. People were, I wouldn't say that people were scared or even afraid of this. They were just annoyed of the fact that our political leaders did not put a system in place that would allow people to get informed that we have a drone up in the air. And the point here being not that you had to be afraid of the drone, but really, why couldn't you just tell us? So people, and I would say people here are more, they realize that we are, the geography of Finland is pretty large, and the chances of a drone hitting someone or coming down is pretty small. But if it happens, and there's not too much you can do about it. Yes, you need to be able to shoot it down, but you shouldn't blame Ukraine for it. It's an unfortunate situation. There's also a strain in the debate about whether these have been misdirected by Russia. And I did see some news recently about, GPS jamming out of Kaliningrad, for example, being one of the reasons why these drones are drifting in, that they're being redirected or misdirected into NATO territory. And of course, that is unfortunate. But again, I think it's sort of collateral damage that you kind of have to be prepared to take.
Yeah, I mean, some time ago on another podcast series, we had a discussion with a brigade general. He's a former head of Secret Service in Latvia, and he used to be a brigade general in the British Army. And he's quite old, but he's really sharp. His assessment was that Russia doesn't have the capacity to launch a kinetic war. Even in Baltics, it doesn't have the capacity right now. It's tied up in Ukraine, and it can't do much. But what we do have to be very wary about is the fact that they're going to do as much hybrid damage as it's possible. And if there is a slightest chance that they can misdirect the drones, they will do it. And if there is a chance that they get their hands on a drone, they will also launch it this way. Like, we can be absolutely sure about it. If there's a chance they can do it, they're going to do it. So yeah, and I totally agree with the fact that it is sort of collateral damage. It's easy for me to say because I am very far from the border, and I can imagine. I can only imagine how stressful it is for people next to border, being woken up every second night by the alarms on their smartphones, alarming them that there's an alert. But then again, it is what it is, and this is something that we have to kind of find a way to live with.
And I think the way to live with it is to really to have that discussion, not about the drones themselves and the alarm systems and the damage they can do, but really about why that is happening, and remind ourselves that these drones are flying for a particular reason. They're flying because of Vladimir Putin waging an aggressive war in Ukraine, and Ukraine defending itself. And as a result of that, somehow it becomes easier to live with the fact that some drones may drift into NATO territory.
Yeah, totally. But okay, there's another twist to the whole drone saga. So I know that there's been a huge, like, there's been several clickbaity articles on internet how a Ukrainian Red Force completely demolishes a Swedish battalion or an Estonian battalion, etc., etc., etc. And I know that it's clickbaity, and I know that the devil is in the detail. But how is Finnish Defense Force preparing for the drone warfare? Because I mean, Finland has a really huge and strong air force, which is something Ukraine didn't have at the beginning of the war, and probably still doesn't have to the level. But nonetheless, drones are playing a key role in the situation.
Yes, and I think part of the thing that made the Finnish military force kind of strong, and the fact that things move quite slowly, so that has been a benefit for a long time. Now that things are changing so quickly, and you see, the next evolution of drone fare happening almost in real time. The question here is like, how can we defend ourselves? What are the capability that we need to build up? Now, I don't represent the military of Finland. I'm just a reservist here. But the conversation here is less about building drones or buying drones, but really learning about how to defend yourself and how to use it, and how to use drones as a tool for either defending yourself or waging war in more general terms. And so there are companies that are being set up right now that are focusing on reading both the radio frequency signatures of drones and building container-based drone factories that you can put out in the field. And based on the latest development of drone technology, rather than building drones that's going to be obsolete a month from now, they continuously upgrade the systems for producing them without producing them in quantity, but in fact replicating the ability to produce these drones in mass on a container basis. So essentially what it is, you have a container like a mini factory, and those containers can be distributed throughout the country, and they will in fact 3D print them, some of the parts, and then assemble them at the actual spot where they will be delivered. So it's a distributed system of producing this, and I know these systems, and it's actually kind of interesting to look at how they're doing this. But the point is not to
really
build something new, but in fact to build capability rather than to build drones.
Yeah, because it also works as a maintenance shop. Probably it can do pretty much everything. That sounds good. That sounds really good. But I mean, you need the engineers doing the stuff. They need to be trained, and they need to be like they have to be on the edge of the development of technology, and constantly evolve their skills. But that sounds like a really interesting concept. Yeah.
So that's the sort of the cutting edge of drone warfare. The other one is a change of doctrine in how you place your troops out in the field.
Yeah.
I'm going to give an example of the doctrine up until now. Has been that you have, obviously, when you have a platoon, let's say, and you have four groups in a platoon. Each of these groups, these squads, will have their own tent. And these are standardized, and everybody knows how to put up the tent, and they're all the same. With drone warfare, the thinking right now is that they will change that doctrine to, instead of having a squad tent for your troops, each soldier will have its own bivak. So essentially just a little personal shelter, and to be much more distributed out in the field. And those are the new kind of skills that would need to be trained. And one of the best ways of training this would be through these voluntary training courses that tens of thousands of people do every single year.
Yeah. This is something we do have. Like we don't have tents.
We can learn from each other.
Yeah. We can share our knowledge here. Finally, something. I mean, because we've been. I mean, what was the name for that? It's a tarp. That's a tarp. We use a tarp to sleep under it during whatever conditions, including winter cold and whatnot. But
it's a completely different setup when you think about the dynamic. Suddenly you have to spread yourself out much more. The communication becomes more difficult. It's in terms of guarding or standing guard during nighttime. supply becomes much more distributed. So it just creates a ton of new friction that the whole organization needs to learn to be able to function.
Yeah. Totally. So okay, that's one part. So, but how about the defense industry in Finland? It has probably grown significantly. I mean, Finland has some really serious defense players like Patria and Nokia, for that matter. And has there been any other emerging defense tech companies that we should totally pay attention to?
I would say yes, Patria and the more traditional ones, Sako, for example, are major players and have been major players for a long time. But the new kind of companies that are stepping up, for example, the satellite company,
Okay.
ICEYE, I think they're called. And so they're already operating a fleet of satellites. And it's one of the emerging powers in sort of satellite imagery.
Yeah.
And so they use different types of technologies to be able to, for example, track movements on the ground, fires. And it's just an amazing new frontier. And Sensorfuse is the other one. This is the company with the containerized drone mini factory.
Okay. Sensorfuse.
Do have a look at those.
Yeah.
Do you see them?
Certainly, I will.
Yeah,
I have that recorded.
I would recommend have a look.
Yeah. I will, because that sounds really interesting. It sounds like a really interesting concept. Okay. Yeah. So we went through the Finnish defense structure. We lightly touched upon the civilian resilience part, and we kind of digged into your personal experience. So first question from the conclusion part.
Mm-hmm.
If you would have to, if you could suggest anyone I should speak to, I mean, it could be from Finland, it could be from any other country. What country would you be most interested in to hear about, like about their experience in the military, and specifically in combining this civilian/military role, because I know that there's a lot of stuff. Our American friends have a lot of content out there focusing on special operations, but I mean, special operations is such a tiny part of what is going on. I mean, they get a lot of spotlight because they can extract Maduro from Caracas, but usually most of the heavy lifting is done by simple infantrymen and women. And in our case, it's very simple people doing their civilian jobs and finding time to do their military duty as well. So which country would you be most interested to hear about?
I think I would be interested in knowing more about, like, in fact, Sweden, and how they are thinking about the I would say the relationship between the military and civilian society. There are so many similarities between Finland and Sweden. And the interesting part, I think, is where we had decades of very similar systems, and they decided to dismantle some of that capability. And what is interesting now is to see how are they rebuilding it? What are the things that they're focusing on? In which order are they building up capability? That would be an interesting topic, because it's almost like looking at things in reverse in a way. And I think that would be a topic for a further, more detailed conversation with our friends in Sweden.
Okay. Gotcha. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to find someone from Sweden. I have someone, I reached out on LinkedIn and asked people to kind of suggest someone from Lithuania. So I'm going to reach out to the person in Lithuania as well, because I'm really interested in that. But generally speaking, this whole thing, this whole podcast and podcast series is dedicated to a very simple idea, that there is the system that Europe and United States and West has built over the last 60, 70 years.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't natural. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of guts to build that. And right now we are at a crossroads, sort of, and some people have to step up, and generally everyone has to step up. And so my last question to you is, what would be your I wouldn't say it's suggestion. I would say, what would you say to a general European who doesn't serve but has been thinking about it? Like, what should I do? How should I do it? Can I do it? Maybe I can't do it. Maybe I'm too old. Maybe I'm too young. What would be your few cents that you could throw his or her way?
I would say to someone who hasn't done his or her military service, don't be a free rider. You have rights and as a member of society, but you also have obligations. And think about it as a service to society. Think about what you can actually deliver back. And it's that very, very short moment in your life when you are the cutting edge of some sort of your military might, for example. And it's an honor to be able to be there to give service to your society. And at some point, if you think you're too old, there's a ton of different roles. I'm 54. I'm not a frontline fighter, but there are other things I know how to do. I've done my part as the most sharp cutting edge in our military service decades ago. But there are things I can take with me, and there are things that I can give back and help those who are now at the very cutting edge. So don't think about just the special forces. Think about what you have that you can bring back to society, and in particular to serve society in the capacity of providing some sort of military support to your armed forces.
You don't look like 54. You look younger.
I am 54.
You're lying. Well, on that note, Rasmus, thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience and a few cents on how the Finnish Defense Force work and generally Finnish society. And hopefully the war never comes, but we still maintain our resilience and grow stronger.
Well, thank you, Ritas, for having me. It was a pleasure to share whatever I could. And I do hope as well that we would never have to face or experience war in our territory. And that's why we stay prepared.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you so much.